Welcome back to First Alert Ford. Around the country, builders are dealing with increased construction and labor costs as well as higher interest rates. And that means cities are looking for different ways to incentivize them. Part of that is improving the process. Oakland, California recently began fast-tracking housing permits by offering an online approval process. Minneapolis made it easier to build duplexes and triplexes, hoping to create more middle housing, a bridge between affordable housing and more expensive new builds. Denver recently offered new floor plans with a single stair design, offering builders more flexibility. And here locally, we recently showed you how St. Peter's created a one-stop shop for issuing permits. But tonight we're looking across the state at a Kansas suburb, Overland Park, just across the border from KC. Overland Park has around 200,000 people and is frequently named as a top destination for families. Their city is also looking for new housing stock and came up with a creative tool for growth in the form of an online catalog. We talked to the city about how it works. What kinds of challenges does Overland Park face with housing? Why are you trying to encourage more housing?
Overland Park is like many Midwestern cities and cities across the country, where housing is a concern. And we're at a spot where we know that there are some things that we can do to sort of help with some of the issues. We are really good at building really large style format apartment complexes. So those 3, 4, 500 units. And we're really good at building large single family houses. So 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 square foot houses. But unfortunately, there are people who are sort of in the middle of those and maybe either from the ability to purchase a home or to rent a home need something that is smaller and less money. And so we're looking at what are those options.
So what is this approach that you came up with recently?
Some other cities were doing what they call pattern zone or portfolio homes or permit ready homes. They basically are houses that you can buy a plan for and with a relatively limited number of steps go from not having a house to having a small scale house. It makes the process a whole lot faster. And as we know, when you're developing real estate, time is money. So the less time you have to spend getting approvals, getting building permits, going through all of that process and doing the design work, it saves both the developers and then really in the long run, the people who are purchasing the homes.
What are these houses like?
They're going to be houses that are similar to things that you might see in 1940s to 1960s neighborhoods, small scale single family in that like 16 to 1800 square foot range. And then there are some that are a little bit bigger. We also have duplexes. And so it opens up some opportunities for types of housing and sizes of housing. They're not actually new to us in Overland Park. There are a lot of houses in Overland Park that are kind of in this, 1,200 to 1,500 square foot range that a lot of people would consider to be starter houses, but they just haven't been built as much recently. From the overall community, we haven't heard a ton yet. What we have done a lot, though, is work with the Home Builders Association here in Kansas City and some other stakeholders in that real estate development world, trying to make sure that plans that are approachable and fit the need of the community, but are also plans that those developers can actually use and sell, because otherwise you can have a great plan, but it doesn't go to market, that it's not actually solving the problem.
Some cities have sort of resisted portfolio homes because of concerns about like fire safety and single stair designs.
We haven't had many concerns about that yet, but one of the steps that our planning department took that, I have to applaud them for is making sure that you have a process that is a little bit faster, but still generates a really high quality, really nice looking house. And so you have those safety steps built in.
Is there some wiggle room to make some changes?
Certainly some wiggle room, especially in those aesthetics. Some of them have kind of a craftsman style to them. Some of them look a little bit modern. There are some minor modifications even that are not aesthetic that you can do, but anything outside of that is going to require a little bit more of our standard process of permit review and approval.
I noticed the different designs have names like Evelyn and Jefferson. And are there any that are particularly popular right now?
I have a house in a neighborhood that has actually lots of these sort of like farmhouse looking, kind of cottagey looking houses. So a lot of them are really what I would say are compelling options aesthetically. I think we will have a lot of interest in some of the single family, the small format single family. We would like to see some of what is considered a cottage court developed out of them.
What's the effect you hope to see in the long run with this?
This program is not a solution to the housing crisis, but it is a tool in the toolkit. So if we are really great at building large single family houses and large format apartment complexes, but there is this missing middle ground, we think that this is one way to sort of boost the market and create more housing.
What are the tools that are in Overland Park's toolkit?
So we're looking at zoning, we're looking at other issues with the Home Builders Association, just trying to make sure that we're still a friendly place to build. But within the city's control, a lot of what we do is sort of, making sure that the building is safe and the building is right for the neighborhood. And
When people see this, what do you hope they take away from it?
if we keep doing the same thing we've been doing, we will continue to have the same result. If we keep building large single family houses and large apartment complexes, those are the things that we're going to get in the market. And so if you have an opportunity to try something new that might generate some housing, I think it's worth giving it a shot.